Hello everyone, and welcome to our Circular Solutions and Innovations webinar. My own name is Amy, and I'm a grant administrator here at the RDI Hub in Killorglin, County Kerry. So just before we kick off, I just want to give you a quick introduction to the project behind this workshop series. The project is the Food Community of Practice, so also known as Food COP for short. Food COP is a Horizon Europe funded project that the RDI Hub is participating in as a startup village. Its goal is to connect startup villages and other key stakeholders to develop and test sustainable food system innovations using circular bioeconomy strategies. So our overall aim is to make our food systems more sustainable and better for the environment. A huge part of the project is collaboration and knowledge sharing from the startup villages, and startup villages contribute by showcasing solutions, raising awareness, and learning from each other as well. That's where the initiatives like this webinar series come in, along with our Food COP platform. The platform is a space where communities, researchers, and startup villages can connect, exchange knowledge, and access a growing library of tools, discussions, and best practices. So you can join using the QR code on screen now, and I'll also be sharing the link in the comments if there is anyone that would prefer to click through directly, and I'll do that in just a moment. But now I'll just hand you over to my colleague Chris, who's our host for today's webinar, and we'll get started.
Thanks very much, Amy. Much appreciated. And just a very warm welcome to everybody here today as well. This is going to be a really, really interesting webinar. We've got speakers across a broad range of subjects, and I think there'll be something for everybody here in the audience. It's going to be a really, really exciting day. So just a quick overview of our four speakers. We have Debbie Reynolds, Local Roots founder, Liz Maher, CEO of Inspired and co-founder of Scotia Village, Fiona Kelleher, CEO of AmuGreen and MyGug, and Colm Casey, founder of Anam Algae, a microalgae startup. So we'll get started with Debbie Reynolds, who, you know, the ideology around Food COP and the integration of rural communities into this kind of beneficial collaboration is a really interesting one. And you can see it in the background of my image here, which is the RDI Hub, which is, you know, very, as you can see, located in quite a rural area. Debbie's home is actually within this image here. So she's very much, you know, within the nucleus of this idea. She's an entrepreneur and eco-warrior and a self-confessed tree lover, and she's the founding member of Local Roots, which is a community-led nursery, an Irish native tree nursery in Cremon in County Kerry. So I'm going to pass you over to Debbie now, who will share her screen and speak about some of her background with Local Roots.
Great, thank you, Chris. Okay. Can you see that?
Yeah, we've got you there, Debbie. Thanks.
Perfect. So what I'm planning to do in the next 50 minutes or so is to give you a bit of a background on our community native tree nursery and a short overview on how trees can contribute to a sustainable farming practice. Now, there are many different reasons for planting trees. They're absorbing carbon dioxide and storing carbon. They increase biodiversity and soil health. But also, you know, healthy crops and livestock, they make sure our waterways stay clean. They're good for mental health and a sustainable income. But the thing is that none of these stand alone. They're all connected. Now, our journey started about 2 years ago when my husband and I bought 5 acres of overgrown farmland here in the southwest of Ireland. And when nature is left to its own devices, plants like blackberries, ferns, and rushes will take over. But what we wanted to do with this site was to create a woodland with native Irish trees just for biodiversity. We were not thinking about wood production. Now, sadly, only 11.6% of Irish soil is covered with trees. And this is compared to a European average of about 38%, as you can see in the graph here. And there's a handful of countries that have over 50%. The problem is that only a small percentage of that are native here in Ireland. So what we are seeing here are large Sitka spruce plantations. And Sitka spruce is not an Irish native tree. So government grants were introduced to increase tree cover and give landowners, such as farmers, stream, hence these large plantations. So these were planted from the 1950s onward. And the problem with them is that they've been planted as a monoculture, as you can see here, which means that it excludes many native wildlife and plant species that depend on our native trees. So this picture shows you the understory of a Sitka spruce plantation. Because they get planted very densely, it excludes the light that ground cover needs to establish itself. And the high density also causes problem with root systems. So the thing with Sitka spruce is they have a shallow root to begin with. So when you plant many close together, their roots will be even more confined, which then becomes very susceptible to what we call wind throw. And that we could see very clearly this last January when Storm Eowyn hit Ireland. It was one of the worst storms in the last couple of decades. And the West Coast especially got hit very hard. Wind speeds were recorded up to 184 kilometers an hour. And the problem is that if one tree goes down, there's this domino effect causing widespread downing of trees. And there's an estimated loss of 24,000 hectares of forest that went down during the storm. And a high percentage of this were these Sitka spruce plantations. Now, this table shows you the different depths of trees. So if you have a mixed woodland with multiple native species, it not only will increase biodiversity, but the resilience in times of rapid climate change that we're experiencing is getting better. So the roots you can see here of Sitka spruce is up to 1 meter in depth, whereas that of, for example, rowan and oak go as far as 3 meters and further. So if you have different tree species at different depths, it means that they stand a better chance for survival. Now, as I mentioned, government grants were introduced to increase tree cover in Ireland. So we planted our woodland under a scheme that is called the Native Tree Area Scheme. And under this scheme, you can plant up to 1 hectare without the need for extensive licensing, which makes it very easy for a small landowner to establish a small woodland like ourselves. So based on spacing of about 3 meters between trees, that brought us to 1,300 trees. And as you can see in our picture on the left, that's a lot of trees. So I personally drove across Ireland to pick up said trees, and I had barely any room left in the driver's seat. I couldn't see outside my back window, but I have to say that the smell of Scots pine in a confined space is absolutely worth the drive. But when I got home, my husband and I, looking at the car, we realized that there were a lot of trees there, and it's a lot of trees for just 2 people to plant, as we had never done anything like this before. Now, the one thing Ireland is famous for is the rain. So needless to say, the weather was absolutely terrible, but Irish people will do anything if there's a promise of a hot cup of soup, some fresh bread, and many, many cups of tea with large amounts of milk and, throw in a slice or so of cake. So what we did was we asked our friends and family to come out and help us plant the trees. Now, the best time to actually plant these trees is in the winter. We were planting young saplings that are dormant, so there's no leaves on them. And at this time, the root system is still very simple. And because they're bare, it makes them very easy to plant, as you're not digging big holes for them. Now, we did not have a huge amount of experience. My husband works in the tech industry and I'm a baker. But along the way, we had made friends with people who are involved in growing and planting native Irish trees with an Irish tree charity called Home Tree. And they have been a valuable asset during all this whole process. And with their support and knowledge, we started our tree planting adventure. And it took us 6 days, so 3 weekends, to get all the trees planted. And it wasn't just fun, it was a way to connect with people in a different way. We had great conversations, and one of the things that kept popping up was how people wanted to do more things like tree planting and felt that there weren't many opportunities around to do that. And because of these conversations, we realized what we could accomplish if we could come together as a group. And we all wanted to do more for biodiversity, for our community and climate action locally. So not only did we have the support from our own community, but also that of our wider circle of those already involved in tree planting. So we took the next step and established a community tree nursery. Now, my excuses beforehand for these pictures, they're slightly blurry, but on our side, we wanted to do everything ourselves. So the planting of like a healthy mix of native Irish trees, but we also wanted to do the maintenance, such as the weed control, because if you get a contractor out to plant the trees, they will also do the weed control, and they get paid by the job, so it needs to be fast and easy for them. So what happens is they spray glyphosate around the trees to keep the weeds down, and glyphosate has far-reaching effects to both our biodiversity and our soil. So that was a big no on our side. Now, on one of my trips to see Home Tree Charity up in County Clare, what I witnessed was how many trees you can grow in a very small space. So we were trying, as a community, we tried to do all the work ourselves, and we learn from each other. And, if none of us know how to, there's always the internet. But the big thing we really needed help with was installing our 2 polytunnels. I remember our site was pretty overgrown. So our friend Paul and his 80-year-old dad, John, bought their mini digger and helped us clearing the site and installing the tunnels. But people wanted to get hands-on. I mean, that's what a community is about. So we organize monthly community days. And what we do is we have a whiteboard and we write down all the tasks that need to be done. And people can just choose what it is that they want to do. So, for example, we put in the beds inside our polytunnel for our trees. We gather acorns in our local national park, and we sow them inside our tunnel. So this last October, we planted about 2,000 acorns in these 2 large beds. And we collect native trees, tree seeds like hawthorn locally. And we also process the berries by extracting the seeds from the flesh and store them to break dormancy in our stratification bed that, again, we build ourselves with a little bit of help of the internet. But it's starting to get a ripple effect. So we get students from the local secondary school out every week during the school year to help us with jobs that need to be done. So for example, here, mulching our planted trees and clearing space and help building outdoor beds. They also make videos for projects that we do with the local primary schools. And they even built owl boxes at school and donated 2 of them to us. And as you can tell, we're putting a lot of work into growing trees and our local biodiversity. And our ambition is to grow 100,000 trees by 2030. But where are all these trees going? So firstly, these trees belong to our community, so our families, our neighbours and community groups. Then there are the local farmers. But we are a volunteer organisation and we do need a little income for next year. So some of our trees will be sold to local foresters for planting under the government schemes I mentioned before. All our trees are certified by the Department of Agriculture. So if we still have any trees left that our community can find a place for, they'll be donated to other charity groups to be planted locally. But why are local native tree nurseries so important? And there's a very good Irish example, and that is ash dieback disease. So ash, or Fraxinus excelsior, is a native Irish tree that was once widespread in Ireland, but an estimated 90% will die from this invasive fungal disease. And this disease was first reported in October 2012, so it's quite a while ago. And it had come into the country on trees that were imported from continental Europe. So we need more local nurseries to reduce the risk of importing diseases and grow resilient trees that are adapted to our climate and its change. And it's as important to us as an island as it is to every other country. But trees are not just important for biodiversity above ground. Native tree species have the highest numbers of native birds, insects, fungi, and lichens compared to those that are not native. But what we can't see is what's going on in the soil around the trees, unless we dig and look closer. And we now know that mycorrhiza, which is a symbiotic relationship between fungi and plants, plays an important role in nutrition, in the biology and the chemistry of our soil. So health of our plants is directly correlated with the abundance of what we call mycelium, which are parts of the fungi that actually connect our plants. And they're being lovingly called the wood wide web. Now, farmers are dependent on their land for the provision of fodder and grass for their livestock and healthy soil for their crops. So the introduction of trees through what we call agroforestry can be hugely beneficial to the health of their soil. Agroforestry is a land management system whereby trees are planted in the same area where we grow crops or keep our livestock. And there are many benefits of having trees on the farm. So, for example, they give shelter to animals during extreme weather, which we've been, getting more and more. Fodder from trees through grazing can provide them with certain essential trace minerals that otherwise would have to be supplemented through their feed. So one of the things, the connection between sheep and willow is that there's cobalt in willow, which is very essential for sheep because it raises their vitamin B12 levels and increases the growth rates of lambs. And because this happens naturally, like the sheep will eat the willow when needed, it means that the farmer doesn't have to use drenches and this way can keep their costs down. But trees are also ecosystems on their own. They house many insects and pollinators, and these increase the yield of crops by increasing pollination. And this picture is of a crabapple, which supports about 93 species of insects. They also provide a windbreak, which increases the yield on crops grown alongside them. And as I mentioned, mycelium on the ground, that gets increased by planting trees, which in return increases the health of our soil. But also leaves and branches helps down the fall of the rain, which is essential for things like water absorption of the soil and flood control. It also prevents soil erosion and they improve the quality of the water that runs off into our waterways. And the one that we all know, is that their roots aerate the soil, and leaves and branches and roots that are rotting help improve the soil quality. In Ireland, there are many grants and premiums available for planting trees. And so what you see here on the top are the rates for agroforestry. So you get a grant and there's the grant comes in two stages, and then there's an annual premium after that for 10 years. In Ireland, we have an active agroforestry forum, which is hosting a conference in November for anyone interested. Now, a lot can be accomplished with a great community, as I hope I have shown here. And what started as just planting a field of trees evolved into something way bigger with a great ripple effect. And trees are our future, not just for us and our food production, but also that of our soil, our livelihoods, and a future for our children and their children. Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Debbie. Really, really interesting. And I think we can all agree that local roots is kind of the proverbial acorn that we're now seeing blossom into the mighty oak when we see the kind of community benefits in the last couple of years from local roots. It's brilliant to see. And I think, and if anybody has a question for Debbie, please feel free to leave it in the chat. I suppose one concept that I've heard you continuously come back to, Debbie, and that's very evident in what you spoke about is this idea of mehel, which is the kind of ancient Irish tradition of this communal spirit and cooperative appreciation. And I suppose that's almost reflective of what Food Cop is as well, when it's kind of these kind of communities working together. Do you have any kind of insight into how that idea of mehel has shaped your perspective when working on local roots?
I think because we started at a place where neither myself nor my husband had any idea of what to do and where to go. Just that first step of asking friends and family to come out and talking to them. Like there's in Ireland, there has been this in the past. Saving turf was a huge thing, and it was a community coming out to do what needed to be done. And I think what we have accomplished in the last really just year and a half couldn't have been done with the group because everyone brings their own expertise and joy, I guess, to it as well. And, we're very much into learning from each other and, asking for help if we can't figure it out ourselves. I just think that, especially after COVID, we kind of lost that sense of community feeling a bit. And, obviously it doesn't take a whole lot to get that going again, even just by starting with your friends and family. Like the ripple effect is just far greater than we could have hoped for.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of appetite for, really localized community initiatives. We've one question from Alexander. Have you talked about long-term partnership and regenerative business stroke financing models with the community or local authorities?
Because we're new to all this, things are starting to come into place. So we actually have a partnership with both Home Tree and the Killarney National Park, which we're close to here. We're still finding our way. It's a fast growing, way faster growing than we ever had expected it. So we're trying to it's all about networking and trying to get things in place that will help us long term. We're just, we're taking it one day at a time, really. That's all that we can do.
Brilliant. Listen, on behalf of everybody here, Debbie, thank you so much. That was really informative, and we really appreciate you coming on to speak today.
Thanks, Chris.
Great. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. So, once again, thanks so much for Debbie for all of her insight there. So, our next speaker is Liz Maher from Inspired. So, Liz is the CEO of Inspired and co-founder of Scotia Village. If anybody knows about Kerry, we have a strong association with Scotia, with Scotia's Grave being very close to where we are in the RDI Hub. And what's really interesting about what Liz is working on, empowering people with intellectual disabilities and drawing on her own background in the European energy sector, this has created some really, really interesting work. So I'd like to introduce Liz Maher. And Liz, when you're available, you can begin sharing your own screen.
Sorry there now. The thing is stopping me from actually putting up the slideshow. There we go. Yeah. Hi, everyone. How are you? Delighted to be here today, and thank you for inviting me. And I just want to thank the RDI Hub because, we've been kind of slowly developing this in the background without a lot of support or networking opportunities. And Amy there in the RDI Hub and all your colleagues, we've reached out and gotten great support from them. And this is a huge opportunity for us to actually be able to engage with others and having that networking and collaborative space and platform to tell people what we're doing and hopefully get some other ideas and solutions to what we're trying to achieve. So thank you for putting this space in place for us, because it's a huge opportunity for us. So just without further ado, I'll just give you some insight into what we're all about and what we're doing. So Scotia Village is really founded by Inspired, and Inspired is a day service for people with intellectual disabilities. And we found that there was a huge gap there with growing concern around climate change and food sustainability and healthy eating. There wasn't really available platforms for people with intellectual disability to go out there and learn about climate change, learn about food sustainability, and enjoy healthy eating in a very hands-on environment. And a lot of what was available, there was lots of resources that were on various apps, various learning platforms that they could sit in front of a laptop and learn, but we found that it wasn't working. We needed to get out there, and we needed an environment where they could actually get really stuck in and learn by doing. So that's where we met with a local landowner in Scotia who had a very similar idea to us, and we formed a partnership. And that gave us access to 12.5 acres of land in Scotia. And it was an amazing opportunity, especially since we'd be working and collaborating with somebody in the community who had a very similar mindset to our own. So that was how we got started. And basically, we felt with the people with intellectual disabilities that this would give them an opportunity to engage in conversations about the climate change and food sustainability, but also to learn and develop their skills that could lead to jobs or that could lead to better healthy eating. And if you look at the employment statistics in Ireland for people with intellectual disability, they're very, very low. And if you look at how many people with intellectual disability are either involved in climate change or self-employment or in the food industry, it's dramatically low. So this incorporated a huge learning process for people. And not only that, but also an opportunity to engage at community level and at local level with local people. And that was very important for us in that whole aspect of inclusion and working on a community-based project. That was very important to us also. So I suppose our vision, there's a couple of lines to our vision, and one of those is the growth of organic food. And here participants are very much involved in that with volunteers from the local community. And our soil has been tested by Southern Scientific, and everything we grow is organic, 100% organic, no pesticides used whatsoever. Within the farm itself, we have 7 acres of native Irish woodlands. And we've also planted an orchard, and we've up to 50 trees planted now. And we also have a berry farm, and we have 2 polytunnels. Everything is organic. And it has been amazing, the amount of learning that has been gained from being on site and the enjoyment that the participants are getting and working with, within the community and working with the community of volunteers as well. So providing that hands-on training, some have actually moved on to employment now with the skills that they have gained, which is absolutely fantastic. And they are learning more and more about climate action initiatives and fostering that sense of belonging within the community and starting to advocate for climate change as well, which is something that has grown organically out of these learning processes. So I've kind of given you an overview of what's on the land with the 2 polytunnels as well, but we've also saw a need for looking at, beyond the organic practices and also the need for the native Irish bees. And so we have an apiary with, I think, 11 beehives now. And that has been fantastic because, there was a huge fear around the apiary at the beginning, but because we've been working with local people that had a huge knowledge around bees and protecting the native Irish bees and also protecting our biodiversity and what we're trying to achieve within the land, they've overcome those fears. They're learning to embrace the knowledge and they're learning to becoming much more involved, which is fantastic. And we've taken them out to other apiaries as well, locally, such as Killarney, and looked at what they're doing and learning locally as well from what people are doing. Sorry now. So most important within Scotia Village is the food loop system. And that is, again, working with people locally. And how we are, I suppose, financially able to sustain ourselves is because we are a day service, we have access to people that are supporting people with intellectual disabilities through the HSE, which is fantastic. We have also job coaches, which are supported by Pubble, which is another form of support to the people with intellectual disabilities. But equally, there is the community itself. And so the organic food which is grown within the village, is actually sold on to organic wholesalers. That gives us some monetary income to be able to sustain the continuous growth within the village. And anything that is ripe but unsold goes out to various charities such as Meals on Wheels and Kerry Food Share. And then overripe produce is composted. So that learning on that food loop system and being able to get involved in that and knowing why it's important has been absolutely fundamental to the understanding of food sustainability and the importance of it. And also the fact that volunteers have come on board and understanding the process that we're trying to achieve, where the food is going, and healthy eating has been absolutely fantastic because it's not just the volunteers. We've also been able to get corporate volunteers involved, which sends the message even further. So the impact is not just with the participants themselves and the staff, it's actually gone wider because families are starting to become involved, the corporates are becoming involved, and we hope from September onwards that we'll be able to provide some workshops also for schools who don't have access to a garden. So the impact is starting to broaden and broaden as we develop, which is what we'd hoped to achieve as well. So there's learning skills and the harvesting techniques, the farming principles are starting to bed down with a lot of our participants here. And also they're gaining much more. They're gaining numeracy skills, literacy skills, communication skills, and also advocacy skills, my apologies. And which is fantastic because they're actually starting to take an interest in becoming ambassadors for climate change. And that will be huge to have somebody, with an intellectual disability and from the disability area as an advocate for climate change. And also to promote healthy eating and cooking with fresh ingredients. As I mentioned earlier, some of our participants have now moved into the food industry, which is something we hadn't anticipated originally. But also what we want to achieve over the next 2 years is that some of them will become self-employed within the food industry also. And we have a huge scaffolding around these participants and a huge support model to ensure that we can actually move and progress this even further. So there are lots of opportunities that these learnings can bring and develop. And, I think, as Debbie already said, it's a very fast-paced area. It's moving much quicker than we had anticipated, which is fantastic to see, because I think when we first looked at the model, we were thinking, oh my God, are we becoming overwhelmed by all the work that we have to do? But we are absolutely amazed at the support that it's gained from the community and from the corporate sectors as well, as they become more and more involved. They're a little reluctant. There's a little arm twisting at the beginning, but as people come and get on board and they see what we're trying to achieve, they're 100% in by the time they walk away and say, God, yeah, this is worth doing. So I want to give you a little insight. It's just a little video about us and what we're doing, and I'm happy to take any questions afterwards.
Welcome to Scotia Village, where organic food production, sustainability, and inclusion come together to create real change. This is more than a farm. It's a community-powered social enterprise where people with intellectual disabilities work side by side with volunteers, businesses, and corporate partners to grow food, protect the environment, and build valuable skills. Every aspect of Scotia Village is designed for participation. The polytunnels, berry gardens, orchard, and apiary are laid out using universal design principles, ensuring that everyone, regardless of ability, can take part in planting, tending, and harvesting. Participants aren't just learning how to grow, they're learning the business of food. They prepare produce for sale, label it, and distribute it to local organic wholesalers. They also operate their own Shopify account, managing online orders and customer interactions, gaining practical e-commerce experience. This is a closed-loop food system. Fresh produce is sold to wholesalers. Ripe but unsold food is donated to Meals on Wheels and Kerry Food Share. Overripe produce is composted, returning nutrients to the soil. Nothing is wasted, not food, not opportunity. Community is at the heart of everything here. Retired horticulturists, farmers, and craftspeople volunteer their time and knowledge. Local schools visit to learn about biodiversity and healthy eating. Businesses and corporates partner with us, bringing resources, expertise, and fresh ideas. This approach directly supports the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, from Goal 2, Zero Hunger, to Goal 8, Decent Work, Goal 12, Responsible Consumption, and Goal 13, Climate Action. It also reflects the principles of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, ensuring that people with intellectual disabilities have the right to participate fully in their communities, not as observers, but as leaders. Along the way, participants discover a deeper connection to nature, understanding soil health, pollination, and the cycles of the seasons. They learn the value of quality food and how healthy eating supports well-being. What you see here is a whole community effort. It's local people and local businesses working together with one shared goal: to create a sustainable, inclusive, and healthy future. Every seed planted here is a step toward climate action. Every jar of honey, every box of produce sold is a step toward employment and empowerment. This is Scotia Village, where the land grows food, the work grows skills, and the community grows stronger together.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that, Liz. I think that video beautifully encapsulates all of the incredible work that you've done at Scotia Village. And, I think the benefits of this nature-based, hands-on approach, especially for people with intellectual disabilities, has been well documented. And I think it's massively inspiring for you to see this issue in terms of equality in the workplace and just meeting it heads on is really, really inspiring. And I even wrote down the note, every seed is a step towards climate ambition or climate action, which was really, really great to see. And I suppose for us, we're really fortunate to have this on our doorstep. If anybody has any questions for Liz, please feel free to leave them in the chat. We have one from Bogdan, who said, "Thank you for your presentation. How exactly does the donation of the food work for the charities? How exactly does the donation of the food work for the charities? Do they come over and collect it themselves, or do you deliver it to them?"
Yeah, no, we deliver it to them. So basically, when we have extra produce, we call them. We list out the produce that we have and make sure that they can use it because we don't want further waste. So basically, we would call Kerry Food Share, we would call Meals on Wheels, and because we're organically certified, then we have a traceability for the farm as well. So that's very important to them now because traceability is everything for anything with food, even if it is vegetables, and they're really delighted with that. The fact that it's grown organically, the fact that there's traceability, and the fact that our participants actually deliver it, because we don't want to take over. We want this to be their project. So basically all we're doing is driving the van and they handle the rest themselves. They handle their own Shopify account. They handle all the interaction with the wholesalers. We want it to be about them and not about us, and not about us taking over the project. We want them to be in charge of it.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the really amazing things that was on show, was that, there's a whole cross disciplinary area of skills you can kind of be working in or have an interest in any area and apply it to something within Scotia Village, which is really fascinating.
Yeah.
I suppose a question from myself, and before I move on to a question for Liz, if anybody would like to leave their LinkedIn or connection details in the chat, if anybody wants to continue the network after here, please feel free to do so. I'd be open to connecting with people with these kind of interests. But a question from myself, Liz, would be more so around barriers to entry and challenges that you might see within the short term. What do you feel like are kind of those main barriers? Obviously, you've got over one in terms of your organic certification, but what do you see in the short term as being your next barriers to entry?
I suppose, God, like this, Scotia Village is really only up and running for the past year and a half. So we've been working at breakneck speed. I think our greatest challenge, actually, strangely enough, has been to get the corporates involved, to spread the message. We don't want this kept as a dark secret. We want this to be a whole community effort, and I suppose we're relatively unknown because we have spent an awful lot of time undercover and getting this off the ground. And it's only this year, and the help with the RDI Hub, that we've been forced to say, all right, get this message out there. So the greatest challenge is in getting the message out there, really, because only that the RDI Hub approached us, we would probably have stayed in the dark for another year and stayed undercover. But this has kind of forced us into the network arena and start getting out there and making us to tell our story. We're not very good in Ireland about telling our story. We're not good at kind of giving ourselves the clap in the back. And we all stay, typing away behind the laptops and doing all the work, and nobody even knows about it. And we were very fortunate to get somebody in marketing this year